I thought so. One of them is why I've titled today's lesson, The Elephant in the Room. Can we get the picture up? Can we get the picture up? The elephant in the room? Certainly the elephant is in the room in there, because it's a topic that most people don't want to talk about, don't want to be associated with. September is National Suicide Month. For 17 years, I have served as a Chico police chaplain. On average, I'm called at least a couple of times a year to help a family who has lost someone to suicide. The aftermath is tragic and filled with all kinds of emotions, and that can include not just their grief, but also shame, guilt, fear, and secrecy. As a suicide prevention trainer, I know and believe that each and every one of us can prevent suicide. How many of you know someone who has taken their own life or who has attempted suicide? Just raise your hands. Look at how many people in the room know someone. It's pretty incredible. I was told not too long ago an alarming statistic, which is that for every one suicide, 190 people are affected by that suicide. Typically, we only think it's like 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 because of the family, but more than we realize have to deal with each one suicide. In 2022, over 49,000 people in the United States died by suicide. And notice that I say died by suicide because when we say commit suicide, we always think of the word as commit, meaning they should be committed to a mental institution. So we're trying to drop that word out of the statement of taking their own life. That's an average. 49,000 is an average of one death every 11 minutes. 1.4 million people attempted suicide that year. Suicide rates were the highest they have been in over 50 years in 2022, and they continue to rise on today. Over 4,300 died in California alone that year. Anyone want to take a guess who the lowest risk group was? No, the lowest age group. The lowest age group. Anybody want to take a guess? I'm sorry, what? Well, actually, 80 and above is the highest risk folks today and the fastest growing group. The smallest group is the 10 to 14-year-olds. However, 14 to 24-year-olds is also a fast-growing group that have committed, there I use the word, suicide. Suicide has a great deal to do with stigma and shame associated with it. St. Augustine, who lived in 353 to 430, was a major opponent of suicide. And the early church declared that any bequests that were coming from someone who died by suicide could not be accepted by the church. Kind of strange. In medieval times, Christian burials were refused to those who died by suicide. Religion shaped the laws, and suicide was considered a crime. I want to know how they were going to take him to court. By the 1700s in England, heirs heirs of those who died by suicide were denied their inheritance. Is there any wonder why we've tried to keep suicide a secret? And St. Thomas Aquinas in the 1200s believed that suicide was a mortal sin. My first introduction to suicide was when I was all of 13 years of age. My family had just left Chico and we had moved to Maine, and it was summertime. And my dad called one morning, late one morning, and said that one of his manager's wives had taken her life that morning, and her daughter, Madeline, had found her. Now, Dad told Mom to get over to that house because we had been friends with them, to get over to that house and help the family, and to be sure and take me along so I could support Madeline. What did I know at the age of 13 about death, and especially suicide? Now, the family were devout Catholics, and in the days that followed, Chet's wife was denied burial in a Catholic plot behind the church. Additionally, she was denied a rosary the night before her funeral, and during the funeral she was denied full rites, and her family believed that she was doomed to spend eternity in purgatory. Fortunately, this no longer exists within the Catholic Church. Is it any wonder, however, that shame and secrecy have been a part of suicide since time began? Maya Angelou states, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you." Just imagine being in grief over the loss of your loved one, not understanding why, or feeling guilt or shame, and not being able to talk about it with anyone, feeling as though you had to keep it a secret. When we think of suicide in the Bible, who generally comes to mind? Judas. Everybody says Judas. Well, actually, besides Judas, there were 6 other individuals in the Old Testament, plus Judas in the New Testament, and we have 2 people who also had suicide ideations in the Bible, and yet we don't talk about this. And of course, Judas, who was the person that everybody looks at that betrayed Jesus, and what an impact does our connection to suicide regarding Judas have on our own thinking about suicide today? Many people connect suicide to betrayal, selfishness, deceit, and condemnation. How many times have you heard someone say that anyone who has been selfish, or someone has been selfish because they took their own life? That belief was established over 2,000 years ago, and it still exists today. The individuals in the Bible that we know of, a few of them were King Saul, his armor bearer, Samson, and Zimri were the ones in the Old Testament. Now in Acts 16, we hear the voice of desperation from the jailer of Paul. And it states, "And when they had inflicted many blows upon them, they threw them into prison, ordering the jailer to keep them safely. Having received this order, the jailer put them into the inner prison and fastened their feet to the stocks. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God. And the prisoners were listening to them, and suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that foundation of the prison was shaken. And immediately all of the doors were opened, and everyone's bonds were unfastened. Then the jailer woke and saw that the prison doors were open, and he drew his sword and was about to kill himself, supposing that the prisoners had escaped. But Paul cried with a loud voice, 'Do not harm yourself, for we are here.' And the jailer called for lights and rushed in, and trembling with fear, he knelt down before Paul and Silas." Many people are prepared for how quickly, not many people are prepared for how quickly life can change and desperation can descend upon them. Given the right set of challenges, when we don't have resources, we can find ourselves in emotional states we've never thought possible. As the song goes, New York Minute, everything can change that fast. In the Bible story about Paul and the jailer is in the dark night. And by dark night, we mean people who are seriously contemplating suicide. The quiet desperation has now reached that point where the jailer is considering killing himself. And note that he is not desperate, but hopeless. Many people assume that suicide is about depression, and not everybody who dies by suicide is depressed. The only way to know if someone is thinking of suicide is to ask them. And the jailer is an example of an impulsive suicide. We sometimes see this with teens today. Remember, their minds are not fully developed until they're 24 or 25, and they make decisions based upon a romantic breakup or academic failure, social rejection, or bullying on the media that can trigger suicide thinking for the young people. Just before I returned to Chico, a friend arrived home one day after work, and she discovered her 14-year-old daughter had taken her life. Her note indicated she was distraught after her boyfriend had broken up with her, and she couldn't live without him at 14. Pretty sad. Tiffany DeBarto, in her book How to Kill a Rock Star, stated no one commits suicide because they want to die. Then why do they do it? Because they want the pain to stop. They're tired of living with despair and pain, and most people think about the suicide are ambivalent. A part of them wants to die, but a part of them really wants to live. So many people are looking for a sign that they're supposed to live. I had a friend who was divorced, and she had 2 young children. She was unemployed, she had very little money, and didn't know when the next dollar was going to come in. So she made a decision that her children would be better off without her, but she had no food in the house, and she didn't want anybody to come in and make an assumption that she was a terrible mother. And so she decided that she better go to the grocery store and get some milk and cereal for their breakfast the next morning. As she got in the car and started it up, she thought to herself, if I can see one person who's worse off than me, just one person, I will not take my own life. On her way, she saw a man at a stoplight in the median with a sign asking for food and help. He sat in a wheelchair with no legs. It was then she decided to live. You're probably wondering why I'm telling you all about suicide today. And I believe that each and every one of us can be a lifesaver. I believe that each of us, through our connection with other people, can reach out and enter into an honest, compassionate conversation with someone who is thinking about taking their life. You might be thinking, no, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a professional counselor, I can't do anything like that. Shouldn't this be done by professionals? Yes, ultimately, the mental health professionals have an important role in suicide prevention. However, every one of us has a key role to play. The first person to become aware of somebody who is thinking about suicide is not a counselor. It's people who know them. It's people who are in relationship with them. It could be a family member, a friend, a minister, a practitioner, a member of somebody that they work with, or a member of this spiritual community. If we're unwilling to take action, the individual in need may not get to a mental health professional ever. Take action. A simple step that each of us can do by simply reaching out. And yet you're probably going with a little bit of butterflies in your stomach right now, and the thoughts rise up that, I can't do that. I'm not qualified. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, states, developing confidence in ourselves, in our ability to meet and handle all undesirable situations, require that we must have confidence in that something which is greater than we are. Then we will have spiritual self-reliance. When this is done, the lesser must always submit to the greater. Weakness will give way to strength. Despair will turn to hope. Hate will become love. Failure will become success. And sickness will dissolve into health. The reaction that takes place is not one of despotic or overruling harshness, but one that moves in harmony, love, warmth, and order, quietly transforming all that it is unlike. Isn't that what our goal is, to move in harmony with love and warmth for someone who's considering suicide? We need to remember that God within us is moving through us to help and save another. Who among us would not choose to help another heal and move on successfully with their life? Our teaching is so clear about healing. Dr. Holmes says it is not our spirit that needs to be made whole, it is our mental reaction to life that needs healing. The decision to take one's own life indeed is a mental reaction to life that needs to be healed. Let's talk about a four-step process that you can do to assist someone who might be considering suicide. It's known as the CALL process. It stands for commitment, ask, listen, and lead. The first step is commitment, and this one's all about you. You commit to tell people who can help you if you consider suicide. You will also tell several people, but not everyone. That means telling 2 or 3 that you are close to. This is about increasing your personal network of support. It's also about reducing your isolation. The individuals who you have chosen to share with also do not feel burdened by they're the only ones who know that you are considering it. If you tell too many people, others may not believe you or think that you're serious. The commitment process about you promising to stay alive and to get help. None of the other promises you have ever made in your life mean anything if you're not willing to keep your commitment to leave. The second tool is the ability to ask. If you don't ask someone how they're doing, you will never ever know. As much as we hope someone considering suicide will tell us, not everyone will be able to keep that commitment. The stigma associated with suicide makes it a difficult subject to talk about. Bringing up a difficult subject requires energy, and people who are thinking about suicide don't normally have a lot of energy. As soon as someone gives you an indication that they are down or considering it, ask them in a way that is clear and compassionate. It could be as simple as, are you thinking about taking your own life? And believe me, they will not take their own life because you've asked them. It's the greatest step you can make. Or you might say, does it ever get so bad that sometimes you think about suicide? Or sometimes people going through what you're going through right now think about suicide. Are you considering it? Several years ago, I heard a physical trainer speaking, and she said, people are always asking me, what's the best exercise? And her response was always the same: the one you will do. It doesn't do you any good for me to give you an exercise that you're unwilling and never do for your body. So pick a way to ask the question that is most comfortable for you. And remember, the question you ask just may save a life. The third step is to listen. James 1:19 says, "Be quick to listen and slow to speak." When we're personally in stress, it is usually the opposite, because we're quick to speak, and especially when there's moments of silence, because we can't stand the silence. And we want to share advice, we want to give a solution, we want to fix it. But slow down and listen. Or we have a fear that may take over, and we freeze and say absolutely nothing. Always ask open-ended questions that avoid yes and no answers. Try stating, "Tell me how suicide became a part of your thinking." Or, "How did suicide become a solution to your challenges?" These open-ended kinds of questions will give you a great deal of information so that you can get them assistance. Help them to understand that you really care. The next step is to lead. This is where you will help lead them to safety and lead them in good hands, and leave them in good hands. It is important that we shift the focus from problems to challenge of keeping them safe. The problems that the person brought up, thinking about suicide, are deeply rooted and developed over time, and we can't solve them in one conversation. We need to shift to the point of safety and resist the temptation to fix the problem of that suicidal thinking. Be clear about what you can and cannot do. Try saying something like, "We need to find a way to keep you safe. Can you we can look at several options together, and then we can choose one." Notice we're not removing their decision-making power. It helps to take them, and then help to take them to a mental health professional. By you going with them and taking them there, they do not feel alone. There is so much more that I could share with you about suicide prevention, but our time is limited. And as you can tell, it's one of my passions, because I have seen so many and how it tears a family apart. The center of Spiritual Living's international theme is creating a world that works for everyone. That means everyone, regardless of their religion, their sexuality, their prosperity, their race, or their beliefs. And if someone's life is in discord, then their world is not working. I believe that the philosophy of science of mind gives us a special understanding to accept people from where they are in life, and then when they need help, they seek it for healing. Dr. Holmes wrote, "You cannot heal that which you see. Healing is unseeing that which is wrong and seeing that which is right." You betcha. You cannot heal that which you see. Healing is unseeing that which is wrong and seeing that which is right. We cannot see the mental challenges a person faces that may have pushed them to a deadly solution. We can, however, be the one who sees and helps them to create a better tomorrow. Our center's theme this year is courage over comfort. And to help save a life, you need to get out of your comfort zone and take steps towards another with a willingness to be compassionate and kind. Remember, suicide is a final solution to a temporary condition. And I have one more commitment I'm going to ask you to make. That is that you connect with others. Schweitzer said, we are all so much together, but we are all dying of loneliness. One of the reasons why suicides are up in America is because people are not connected with others. So I'm asking each one of you to make this the friendliest church and center in Chico by greeting people you don't know. Get out of your comfort zone. Sit in a new place in the center, next to somebody that you're not familiar with. Make everyone who enters our door feel wanted and welcome, and then do the same wherever you go. Affirm with me, I am a spirit-filled connection to love, healing, and wholeness. I am a spirit-filled connection to love, healing, and wholeness. Let's do it again. I am a spirit-filled connection to love, healing, and wholeness. Together, we can make suicide a final solution to a temporary situation, a thing of the past in our community, by choosing courage over comfort and being a lifesaver. This is the truth in my life, and this is the truth in yours, and so it is. We're ready for you again.